Olivier Gergaud, Professor of Economics at the KEDGE Business School. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, Gergaud, Carl. So the topic is today is to explore whether we can, using quality scores from experts, we talked about these different experts earlier today, if there is a difference when they have to judge organic wines or biodynamic wines or conventional wines or some natural wines and so on and so forth. So this is a paper joint with Magali Delmas, who is a management professor at UCLA. And when I visited UCLA in 2011, we started to work on some survey data with Magali. And Magali, we took a look at this survey answers about, okay, what are the main motivation for you to pursue certification? And so we were surprised to see that the first motivation among California winemakers was to provide a clean environment for future generations, but that's not the topic of today. And the second motivation that is mentioned by 20% of participants is to improve quality of grapes. And the fifth motivation is also to maintain soil quality. So the main motivations, among the main motivations to become organic or to get, to invest in this costly process is to increase quality, also to please your customer base, because as you can see, it's to grow consumer demand and to increase demand from restaurants and retailers. It's not so often that they selected this answer, but one clear motivation is to improve quality. So we try to assess the impact of these this variety of vineyard practices, and we just focused our attention on organic practices, biodynamic practices, and non-certified sustainable practices, and to compare these practices in terms of quality with conventional practices. So the idea is to see if when a producer starts changing his or her practices by reducing the amount of chemicals used in the vineyard and in the cellar, whether we can observe the impact on quality through something. So we need a metric to be able to assess the impact of these sustainable, either certified or not certified practices on quality. As you can see on this chart here, this is the number of chemicals or treatments that are allowed under conventional practices. This is less under organic practices. This is even less under biodynamic practices. And I will skip the discussion on the natural practices because we don't really know exactly at this stage, because of a lack of certification, where do we stand in terms of natural wines. When we ask the opinion to producers from all over the world, what do they declare when they become organic? When they become organic, for John Williams from Stag's Leap in California, he declared that organic growing is the only path of grape growing that leads to optimum quality and expression of the land. When the soil is healthy, the vines are healthy. When we asked the opinion to Robert Eden from Chateau Maris in southern France, he declared that over the long term, have a much healthier plants and in much healthier soil, producing better tasting fruit and producing better wines. So they make the link between the decrease in terms of chemical use and the impact on the sustainability of the vineyard, the life in the soil, and they get better grapes, and it seems to produce a better wine. In Australia as well, Ron Lofton from Jasper Hill declared that if you wish to express true terroir, which is a concept invented by us in France, a weird concept, I must confess, you should be trying to keep the soil healthy. Herbicides upset the balance of the vineyard simply because dead grasses are an essential part of the vineyard floor. Okay, so the issue is that we don't really have the ideal data set to investigate this question. So there is no experimental data that a researcher can use today to compare conventional wines with organic wines. Say, ideally, we would need to have data from a winery that would plant and would conduct the vineyard under conventional practices, and just next to this block, we would have the exact same producer who would adopt different practices, organic practices or biodynamic practices in the same area, and they would make 3 different wines. We would need a team of independent testers and to get some scores that we could use to compare the quality of this or that wine produced under different viticultural practices. And this type of data is not available at the moment. Of course, the drawback of using experimental data is that we would need this type of data on about many wineries as possible here in the US, in France or Spain or whatever, and we would get more samples to taste and more data. So what we did instead is to scrape data from different websites. As you can see here, we scraped Goemio, the French edition of Goemio, and we scraped also Béthane de Sauve, and the third source of information we used is Gilbert Gaillard. In total, we used information on about 128,000 wines to compare the ratings of eco-labeled wines with and without third-party eco-certification to the reference category, which is conventional wines here. Interestingly, in the database, we have so many wines, but we have very few wines that sometimes change depending on the vintage. They switch from conventional to organic or from organic to biodynamic, and sometimes they would lose their certification because they have to use a treatment in some bad years, and they are back in the process for 3 years. But fortunately, because of the huge size of this database, we identified 2,000 wines, about 2,000 wines, that switch from one category to the other. With this interesting subsample, we matched the samples of these 2,139 wine vintage pairs to 67,000 wines that look similar all around. That the idea is we applied a differences methodology coupled with a propensity score matching technology. So it's we used regression analysis, and we got the following results. No, that's not. We need to take a look at the distribution of the grade distribution per publication first. As you can see here, there's a clear pattern. In dark red, you have biodynamic wines, and the share of biodynamic wines is growing with quality. So more biodynamic wines, even if they do not dominate the highest category, with ratings that range from 12.5 to 20 points. This is different from US publications, because here it's only out of 20 points. But still, you see here biodynamic wines with better grades. Organic wines, which are in green, they, as you move on, and you would get more organic wines in the highest categories, but above a certain threshold, let's say here, above 17 points, you would see the share of organic wine shrinking. Here in light green, you have this category of sustainable wine. In France, it's called Lutte Raisonnée. It used to be called Lutte Raisonnée. Now there is a certification called Haute Valeur Environnementale, but back then, with the data we had at our disposal, this type of certification was not that used and common in the market. So we see here that rezoned wines are the share of rezoned wine is decreasing with quality, and the share of conventional wine is increasing with quality. So it's a bit confusing without using econometrics to tell whether the impact of organic practices is positive or negative or not significant. So we need to use econometrics for that. Just a few words about the conventional category. So you have in this category producers that didn't pursue certification, but they are practicing organic, they're practicing biodynamic, and this is a mixed category between, producers who would use on a regular basis chemicals, treatments, herbicides, fertilizers, blah, 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 in the vineyard, and other producers who would not use any treatment at all, but they decided not to pursue certification. So our benchmark is not a pure benchmark, unfortunately. We don't know exactly. If within this category, everybody is using chemicals, so we don't really know. So that's the most interesting graph. I think this one here is less interesting, and you see the share in this publication, Gilbert Gaillard, is much smaller in terms of organic wines. There are fewer wines under this in this category, and there is no clear pattern. There is a clear pattern with this big database that we scraped at Béthane de Sauve, and you see that the share of organic wines, and there are very few, we identified very, very few biodynamic wines in the in this publication. There's a slight pattern here that would be in favor of organic wines. Okay, so the results are the following on this large sample of French wines. Conventional and sustainable is almost the same, so it doesn't change anything to be sustainable or conventional. So the interpretation of this result is that conventional producers are sustainable producers. So they are not producers using chemicals all the time. They are practicing sustainable. They do care about the environment at some point. But when switching from switching from sustainable to organic, there is a significant effect at around 6.2%. So on average, a winery that would switch from organic to from conventional to organic, or from sustainable to organic with a certification from a third-party organization, would receive better grades from these different publications that are very important and influential in France. And again, if you decrease and you go even further in terms of environmental practices, you would get even better grades. So when you would switch from organic to biodynamic, then you would again increase your grades and your scores. Okay. We received a substantial amount of media coverage because everybody was interested in knowing the difference between organic wines, and it has been hotly debated. It's very touchy. It's a very touchy topic because it tends to oppose conventional producers to organic producers. We're not opposing anybody. The idea is just that we would like to describe for this panel of testers the impact of switching from one category to the other, all of the things equal. If you would actually change your practices, what would be the effect on these grades? And it seems to be positive. That's more or less it. Just what are the possible explanations of the results? There are three main points that are raised by scientists. They argue that chemicals used in conventional viticulture kill some important organic components of the wine that lead to its quality. Scientists also argue that organic and biodynamic practices are associated with a reduction in yield. We talked about that before, through pruning and thinning. These, in this incidence, and general physiological performance. And the last one, the last explanation is that sustainable practices, certified or not, are more labor-intensive compared to conventional practices. And this might lead to more tailored attention to the vine and therefore an increase in quality. Thank you so much.